This video is brought to you by Mantis Sleep. Mantis Sleep make the world's best sleep masks and functional sleep accessories. Their range of masks are made from soft, breathable materials that provide 100% blackout for better sleep with zero pressure on the eyelids and adjustable straps for a personalized fit. From their cool mask, which soothes eyes and sinuses with its evenly distributed cooling system, the warm mask, which alleviates stress in dry eyes, powered by natural steam, to the aroma mask with scents that gently calm and relax you as you sleep, and many more. Mantis Sleep is here to facilitate better sleep. They're providing FCE viewers with a special discount, so head on over to mantisleep.com and use the code FCE to get 10% off your next order. The long-awaited new Scream is finally here. This marks the first Scream not to be directed by the greatly missed Wes Craven. Instead, ready or not, Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillette are at the helm. Ultimately, legacy is the main theme of this movie. The meta-commentary this time around focuses on legacy franchise reboots, fandom, and the high standards fans have for sequels. Let's dive into this movie and the way that it deconstructs the franchise film, as well as how it connects to the other movies in the series. Major spoilers incoming, so back out now if you haven't seen it yet. First, let's briefly go over the previous films.
You like scary movies?
Uh-huh.
What's your favorite scary movie?
I don't know.
There's the original 1996 Scream, which introduces Neve Campbell, Courtney Cox, and David Arquette as Sidney Prescott, Gale Weathers, and Dewey Riley. The Ghostface killers in that movie were Billy Loomis and Stu Macker, played by Skeet Ulrich and Matthew Lillard. Then there was Scream 2, which introduced the in-universe stab movies. Gale essentially capitalized on the murders by writing her own book series, The Woodsboro Murders, which were then adapted into the stab movies. This is when stuff really starts getting meta, thanks to the movie-within-a-movie narrative.
Are you suggesting that someone's trying to make a real-life sequel?
It's a classic case of life imitating art, imitating life.
In Scream 2, the murders begin at a previous screening of Stab, and in Scream 3, the Ghostface killers target the cast of Stab 3.
And it is a force to be reckoned with, because true trilogies are all about going back to the beginning and discovering something that wasn't true from the get-go.
Scream 4 then took it up a notch by bringing commentary on social media into the franchise, which was in its infancy in that stage, while of course satirizing remakes and sequels along the way.
All there are now are remakes. Only horror the studio's greenlight. The unexpected is the new cliche, so the reversals become the new standard.
Dewey is the Woodsboro sheriff and married to Gale Weathers. Unfortunately, during the time between Scream 4 and 5, Dewey loses his job and his wife, paving the way for Deputy Sheriff Judy Hicks to get promoted.
Looks like the celebration's begun.
High school kids, probably.
Yeah. One generation's tragedy is the next one's joke.
This time around, our lead character is Sam Carpenter, played by Melissa Barrera. Her sister Tara is brutally attacked by a killer in a Ghostface mask, but she manages to survive, and we find out that the reason Tara was targeted was essentially to lure Sam back to Woodsboro. See, Sam is actually the daughter of the OG Ghostface killer Billy Loomis. Her mother had lied about who her real father was, and this caused a whole bunch of drama for the family when Sam found out at age 13. Her dad walked out, Sam went on drug binges, and eventually became estranged from his sister. Oh, and Sam occasionally sees hallucinations of her father, so there are plenty shots of the CGI de-aged Skeet Ulrich throughout the film. Sam returns to Woodsboro with her boyfriend Richie. She quickly starts making moves to figure out how to protect her sister, and enlists the help of Scream veteran Dewey Riley. As is to be expected, from the very beginning, all of Tara's friends are suspects. There's Tara's overprotective friend Amber Freeman, twins Chad and Minky Meeks Martin, Wes Hicks, and Chad's girlfriend Liv McKenzie. Not only is everyone a suspect, but anyone could be a victim, even the legacy characters. The important thing to know about this story is that it's a requel. Basically, it's not exactly a reboot, but not exactly a sequel either. It has just enough context that a newcomer can piece the idea of the general story together, but also builds upon the original story for the fans. Think 2018's Halloween, or the planned Exorcist trilogy from David Gordon Green. That being said, Scream does serve as a direct sequel to Scream 4, and doesn't retcon any of the films like Halloween did. When Mindy starts to describe requels to the characters, she admits that fans are split on the terminology. There's also an amusing scene in the film where critics talk about the Stab movies and rip on its naming conventions. The commentators say something along the lines of, "Don't call it Stab, just call it Stab 8. Who are you fooling?" This of course is a winking jab at how the movie is called Scream instead of Scream 5, much like 2018's Halloween. You can't just do a reboot, Mindy says, citing recent flops like 2019's Black Christmas. You have to build something new, but not too new. And for it to work, you always have to have connections to the original. And of course, Scream has plenty of connections to the original movies. Most obviously, there's the inclusion of Dewey, Gale, and Sydney, but more essentially, everyone targeted has some kind of connection to past events. As mentioned, Sam is the daughter of Billy Loomis. The second victim, Vince Snyder, seems like a pretty random target until the gang find out that he's actually the nephew of Stu Macker, the other killer from the original Scream. There's also Wes Hicks, son of Sheriff Judy Hicks from Scream 4. Kind of ironically, the characters joke and tell him that he won't be targeted because he's related to someone from the Stab sequels, and as they put it, no one cares about the crappy sequels. He and his mother both take the threat of Ghostface very seriously and arm themselves with pepper spray and tasers at all times. It's threat level midnight 24/7 at the Hicks residence. Despite this, that doesn't protect either of them from being brutally murdered. Finally, there's Chad and Mindy. Their uncle is the horror expert from Scream and Scream 2, Randy Meeks, and we even get a brief cameo from their mum, Scream 3's horror expert Martha Hicks, played by Heather Matarazzo. It's fitting then that her daughter Mindy is the resident expert in this movie. Chad teases her for being into the Stab movies, seeing as how they're basically a recreation of the murder of their uncle and all of his friends. And in a twist of fate, though Mindy seems to know the rules, she still gets stabbed, while watching Stab and yelling at the characters to pay more attention to their surroundings, no less. It's terrifyingly hilarious. Luckily, both Mindy and her brother ultimately survive their respective attacks. Though Mindy lays down the definition of the requel, it's actually Dewey who outlines the rules for this movie. Number 1, never trust a love interest. 2, the killer's motive is always connected to something in the past. 3, the first victim always has a friend group that the killer is a part of. There are rules from the older movies that the characters must take into account as well, like the classic never say "I'll be right back" and never assume the killer is dead. You need to double tap. This time around, it's not so much a commentary of all horror reboots so much as it is a breakdown of the Scream franchise. Where the previous Scream movies were commentaries on the horror genre as a whole and the nature of franchise sequels, the core element of Scream 5 is fandom. It's riffing less on the actual storylines of horror sequels and more on fan reactions to them. This is all revealed definitively in the third act, when the killers are shown. Dewey was right all along. Richie, the love interest, was bad news, and the other killer was their friend Amber. Their motive? To gather all the legacy characters and their relatives together so that they could create their very own Stab sequel. As Sam puts it early in the movie, they're all in the middle of a big Stab fanfiction, and boy does everyone get stabbed. Richie and Amber angrily yell about how fans deserve a movie that respects their wishes, and yell about how fandom can't be toxic because it's all about love. Of course they yell about this while holding people at gunpoint for the sake of a reboot, so they don't exactly have a leg to stand on. Amber and Richie met up on online message boards and bonded over how much they thought the Stab sequels disrespected the originals. Richie was a long-time fan, and Amber became obsessed after learning that she lived in the former home of the infamous Stu Macker, in probably the first case of location-based psychopathy. Since the leads in this movie are primarily Gen Z, there's an interesting rift between the characters when it comes to horror. Generally, the younger characters bite their thumbs at slashes like Stab, claiming that they want more elevated horror like The Witch, Hereditary, or Get Out. This dwindling interest in slashes is part of Amber and Richie's motivations. If they can essentially reinvigorate interest in Stab with their ultimate sequel storyline, then they can revitalize the entire slasher genre, which is the motivation of the filmmakers, of course. Ultimately, with the shocking death of Dewey, Gale and Sydney track everyone down to Amber's home and defeat her, while Sam overpowers Richie and gives him the stabbing that he deserves. But with the hallucinations of her father having been so vital to her survival, I get the feeling that we already know who the next Ghostface killer is going to be. Despite the notable absence of series creator Wes Craven, Scream still has its finger on the pulse. It's a surprisingly fantastic return to form for the franchise, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, come join our regular streams on Twitch, and yeah, if you have any other suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. As always, it's been a pleasure. Niyat here with Film Comics Explained. Thanks for stopping by.